Good evening. I'm Bill Bowie, and welcome to our committee and board meetings on May 11th, 2022. I will make the requisite motions so that we can conduct these meetings virtually. To conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by FOIA and the Fairfax County Emergency Ordinance, the Park Authority Board needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record, as we did at our first electronic meeting. During our meeting, if you wish to be recognized, please raise your hand, and when I recognize you, please say your name. This will ensure that you are recognized and the public knows who is speaking. If you intend to vote nay or abstain on any item, we will need to do a roll call on those votes. Because each member of this board is participating in these meetings from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at appropriate volume for all of the other members. Accordingly, I'm going to conduct a roll call and ask each board member participating in these meetings to state your name and the location from which you are participating. And I will ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. And following this roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member's voice, and we will do so alphabetically. Also, as the evening progresses, if additional board members join us for our meetings, I will ask them to verify their audibility and their location. So, Abena Adu.
Abena Adu, joining from my residence in Lee District.
Lynnwood Gorham.
This is Lynnwood Gorham, joining from my residence in the Mount Vernon Magisterial District.
Tim Hackman.
Tim Hackman, participating from my residence in the Drainsville District.
Ron Kendall.
This is Ron Kendall, participating from my home in Mason District.
Faisal Khan.
This is Faisal Khan. I'm at my residence in Providence District.
Ken Quincy.
Ken Quincy, participating from my residence in the Providence District.
Kyle Stone.
Kyle Stone, participating from George Mason University's Fairfax campus.
Mike Thompson.
Mike Thompson, participating from my office in Alexandria, Virginia.
And Jim Zook.
Jim Zook, participating from my home in the Springfield District.
Maggie Godbold is absent and excused this evening. I'm Bill Bowie, and I'm participating from my residence in the Hunter Mill District. At this point, I will pass the virtual gavel over to Secretary Mike Thompson so that I may be heard to make the requisite motion. I move that each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member of this board.
This is Mike Thompson. You've heard the motion. Is there a second?
Tim Hackman, I second.
This is Mike Thompson. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. The motion passes.
Thank you. This is Bill Bowie. Second, having established that each member's voice may be heard by each other member, we must next establish the nature of the emergency that compels these emergency procedures, the fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for public access to this meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for this board to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting, and that as such, FOIA's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of this board and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that this board may conduct this meeting electronically through Zoom. It is so moved.
This is Mike Thompson. You've heard the motion. Is there a second?
Tim Hackman, I second.
It's Mike Thompson. Is there any discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Mr. Chairman, the motion is approved.
Thank you, sir. Now that we have all the preliminary matters complete, we can begin with the Administrative and Board Management Committee meeting. Reminder, when you're talking, please state your name. And I will turn it over to Faisal Khan at this point, who is the chair of the ABMC committee. meeting.
Good evening, everyone. This is Faisal Khan. I call to the order of Administration and Board Management Committee meeting. And Allison, can you please take it from here?
Thank you, Faisal. We will continue our journey on the policy manual review process. We're still in the second half of the 100 section, so we're gonna just go through a couple more policies tonight. This is the review process. We've walked through that a few times, but I wanted to keep that slide in there for the public in case anyone has questions about the process. Our agenda tonight, we will go through 4 policies: partnerships, sustainable management, user fees, and public art. And first up, we have policy 107, and Bobby Longworth is going to talk to that policy.
Great. I'm Bobby Longworth, the Executive Director of the Fairfax County Park Foundation. And since we are one of the participants that works with Park Authority and partnerships, I've been asked to share this policy update with you. We've written it as more of a policy and less procedural. And so it melds a bit more with the other policies. Additionally, there's an emphasis on the One Fairfax policy that is defined a bit within here. And it is also added as an official reference if someone were to want to know the entire One Fairfax policy. And basically, we want to focus on the fact that partnerships be equitable. They should be equitable both in geographic and also programmatic access. So we've also strengthened wording relating to the transparency, public process, and communications. And additionally, we have included the Fairfax County purchasing resolution as a reference. Any comments, questions?
This is Lynnwood. Bobby, were you forwarded my comments before the meeting?
Did you send the comments to, who did you send them to?
I talked to Sarah about them.
Okay.
No is the answer then.
So Sarah and I discussed the comments briefly, and I thought we were going to discuss them here. If you'd like me to bring them up, I can bring those up, or if you would like to.
I've got no problem restating them.
Okay.
The way the policy was rewritten away from the bullet points, I found it a little bit harder to understand. And I had to actually read it several times to figure out, I believe, the intent of it. And I just thought that the original format was a lot more clear and concise. And I would have preferred see the equity things added in bullets so they were crystal clear. Instead of the way it was. The format that it's been changed to right now has at least 4 times the words that the original one did. And I just think it could be done more concisely in the format that it started with. I have absolutely no problem with any of the content at all and think it's necessary and I support it. But again, I had a hard time figuring out what the content was intended to be in the paragraph format that it had been changed to. So those were my comments about it.
Thank you, Lynnwood. We can work on that.
Thank you.
For the next round.
I mean, I want to make sure I'm not the only one that thinks that if you're going to go to the trouble to work on it. But anyway, that's my opinion.
Any other questions?
Yeah, this is Mike. I'm sorry, I was raising my hand, but I don't think anybody can see me. So when we're talking about partnerships and we're talking about the transparency, Does this apply? Does this apply to partnerships that might be with other parts of the Fairfax of government entities inside of Fairfax County? And is there a way that perhaps, given some of the previous things that have happened, we can make sure that the transparency stuff is set up in a way that would require them to be more transparent with the community than they might have otherwise been when trying to partner with us?
Sorry, yes, this is Amy Vosper. Yes, I think we can look at that to see where in the policy that we have for the internal or agency-wide and the external as well. And to
Okay,
see,
so we have it's a separate policy for partnering. I thought this was I didn't realize there was a separate policy for when we do something with other parts of the county government apparatus.
no, we don't have any other policy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just occurs to me that if this is going to apply to all partnerships, A, does this apply to partnerships with other parts of the county government? And B, can we protect ourselves from things that might have happened in the past by making sure that we have some clearly delineated requirements for transparency with the public?
Okay, got it. Yes.
Thanks. I think I'd like to add that we were trying to balance keeping it flexible enough to be open to new partnerships, but also to mitigate any issues. So I think that's definitely a great recommendation. And also it was the way it was written before was a little more one-sided, what's coming from the park authority, as opposed to a true partnership where there are benefits from multiple sources. So good comments.
I would note, I think I don't want to leave Lynnwood out on his own when I say that we did add a whole lot more words and not necessarily a whole lot more clarity.
Okay.
So there might be some ways to figure that out a little bit.
Okay. And structure it to include, to make sure that we're covered on the areas that you brought up.
Yeah, I mean, if we might have partnerships with some other government entity in the county of some sort, I just want to make sure that they can look at our policy and go, oh, wait, we need to be very transparent with the community on what we're doing and not come into us and say, oh, I don't know, the last minute and try to insist on things.
Yep. Yes. Okay, so we will make it clearer as well. And
Thank you.
Words.
All right, next up is policy 108, sustainable management.
Ron had his hand up for a question.
Not so much a question, but concurrence with the others that spoke. And I think the reference that we're making about other public entities we might be partnering with has to fit into that One Fairfax policy bullet, because that's where we want to hold people accountable for the level of transparency that we expect with our sister agencies.
Ron, I would just slightly disagree in that I think you're right that it should apply there, but I think that we need to be equally transparent and make sure that in other aspects of our strategic plan or our master plans and stuff that it's compatible with those as well. I agree that it needs to fit within our activity in One Fairfax, but it should also fit within the other strategic and master plans and stuff that I think are as equally binding on us as is One Fairfax.
I don't disagree with that either.
Thank you.
All right, 108 is sustainable management, and that will be John Burke.
Hi, everyone. This is John Burke, the branch manager for natural resources. So we reviewed policy 108, sustainable management. This policy is aimed at ensuring that our long-lasting park investments are supported by sustainable and effective park management and stewardship practices. The biggest change to this policy was the emphasis and strengthening of language relating to mitigation for impacts to parks and avoidance of impacts to parks when possible. In addition to the emphasis on mitigation and the strengthening of the language as it exists in the policy, we also included soil as a list of the resources to protect and preserve, to go along with some of the existing policies that LDS administers on Park Authority property and throughout the county, and also to protect our rhizomal and mycelium networks in some of our forests and meadows and natural areas. In addition to that, we made a small change to alter the use of resources from efficient use to responsible use to capture the use of, for example, water for prescribed burns, where we may be using it responsibly in the implementation of a prescribed burn. It may not be an efficient use though, but depending on the nature of the use, responsible may be a more appropriate term. And those were the substantial changes to this policy.
Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. On the bullet, I'm not sure what number, but the new big red bullet on the second page on land and facilities under control of the county, that talks about, there's a line in here for projects that will impact parkland. I think that's supposed to be parkland. The policy is that non-parkland alternatives be pursued first, unless, and then there's the rest of it. We went back and forth with this on cell towers a bunch of years ago, and moved away from a policy that's basically said you have to prove that the cell tower can't go anywhere else before you put it in a park. I'm just wondering if is this language in effect going back to the old policy?
The intent of the language is to coincide with our mitigation approach, which emphasizes avoidance of impacts to Park Authority property before mitigation, or before requiring some sort of supplemental payment or mitigation activity for those impacts. So the first approach to any mitigation policy for natural resources is to avoid those impacts and look for alternatives. So especially in areas where we have potential roadways or trails or construction, the first approach for plan reviewers in the natural resource branch, if there is deemed to be a potential park impact, is to work with the developer to explore alternative options to that impact as a first step. So that's what that is intended to address.
So again, just back to, and I just remember the back and forth we had for several meetings and everything over the cell towers. Would this bring back the policy we moved away from, that the cell towers had to basically exhaust all their non-park alternatives, regardless of expense, regardless of coverage issues or anything else, before we would even consider putting them on parkland?
So this is Jay. So I think that the most important portion of that, and John's right, we want to make sure that we're looking at projects in an order, and the order should be avoid, minimize, then mitigate. And oftentimes people just jump to the mitigate, like, okay, we'll just give you money back, or we'll, for it. Well, no, you don't. You can avoid the impact, and it's not always not doing the project. Oftentimes it's not doing the project as wide. You're not building a huge wide road. Maybe your shoulders have to come in, or something like that. That's why at the end it says, unless environmental, economic, social, and engineering impacts move the project off parkland are proven to be prohibitive. So basically it's within the public good. So we're talking about a road that needs to go from point A to point B. Obviously, we don't want the road to flip over, 300 feet and go through a neighborhood, right? Because that's not economic, social, and engineering impacts are not balanced. But we want to make sure that people don't just assume that they have to give us back the amount of parkland, and they can impact as much parkland as possible.
So with that in mind, maybe, and again, I don't know the legal ramification of what I'm saying, but would it be better to say alternatives be considered first rather than pursued? I mean, pursued implies to me that you actually have to go out and try and make them work, which would mean, engineering studies or whatever the other stuff is, but maybe considered is a better word than pursued.
I think considered is a good substitute for that, because one of the first things that we would ask for is show us your other alternatives and show us the impact to the other alternatives. I don't think that dilutes it, and I think that it does. Yes, I think that's a fine edit.
This is Lynnwood. I actually think that does dilute it, and I think we need to leave it in a way that we're pursuing the non-park options first. And frankly, the way it's written, as it sums up, proven to be prohibitive, it does give latitude if there's big reasons not to. It gives latitude to use the parkland if you want to, and those two words used together are vague enough that, if there's a justification, it can be done, and there's room to do that. So I'm just my opinion, and I'll certainly go with the consensus of everyone else, but I kind of like it the way it's written now.
Yeah, I'll just say that I think it's a step backwards and back towards the policy that we debated and went over with the cell tower stuff. I think it's just and since this applies to everything, it could easily become the hammer used that the cell tower policy was.
But I think the original cell tower language, and I remember exactly what you're talking about, was very direct and very tight and left little flexibility. And my interpretation of this language is that this language is a little more flexible than the cell tower language was originally.
I think that would depend on interpretation of the words by who was doing it at the time. So that's my concern.
Just wanted to make one point. I think that the two bullets can, in concert with one another, will help in terms of what's possible and what we want to see happen out there. And that includes if a cell tower is essential to a certain area, then we are able to ask for the mitigation or mitigate the impacts of what's happening on the parkland. So it's both bullets as opposed to one or the other.
Amy, that's correct. So the first bullet is putting them on notice that they don't just come in with these projects. The second bullet is the teeth, which is who is the entity that determines non-park use of parkland. And that's when the projects come to the board to determine non-park use of parkland, where they show that the impacts were unavoidable or environmental, economic, social, and engineering impacts to move the project off parkland were prohibitive. And then we move into the mitigation.
Else?
I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I just that's my concern.
Mike, I do agree with your concern, but I just think that the language here does give enough flexibility for us. But I hear you loud and clear that we need to be able to explore options. So I agree with your concept, just disagree a little bit on the interpretation of the words as they are.
No, I appreciate that. I may be the one that's completely out of step. I raised the concern, and if nothing else, then this is, on some video record somewhere 4 years from now when somebody says what we all meant when we considered it, if there's such thing in Park Authority policy as legislative history.
Duly noted, Mr. Thompson.
All right.
All right. Policy 109 is user fees, and Mike Peter is going to speak to this one.
Thank you very much, Allison. We trimmed around the edges in this policy in different places to both make sure that in our fee development that we are appropriately considering the equity issues that we're talking about. We also wanted to make sure that there was no language in here that specifically said that this had to be general fund and this had to be revenue fund. We wanted to be able to give some flexibility with the work that we'll be undertaking with consultants and others as we move forward. In addition, we clarified the difference between the fees that go before the board and the fees that are approved by our executive director, by Jay. And essentially, the fees that are approved by the director are generally user fees, admissions, and rental fees, and programmatic fees come before the board. Those are the main issues that we dealt with here. We wanted to make sure also that we were no longer referencing the financial management plan, as we talked about in the last policy discussion, that we are referencing the Park Authority strategic plan and our annual business plans, since that really forms the core of what we're focused on with our financial management. So those are the basic changes. Are there any questions or concerns? I see Tim's hand up.
Mr. Chairman, yes. On the, I'm sorry, on the policy, near the bottom, it talks about user fees for facilities and services may be funded. It looks like the subject is wrong there. Shouldn't it be the facilities and services with user fees may be funded by the combination? We're not funding the user fees, we're funding the services and facilities. Isn't that correct?
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Hackman. We can adjust that.
Okay. I did have another thought, but I will raise it, but I won't push it because I believe in my view, it's counter to 1 Fairfax. But if we wanted to emphasize how stretched our budget is, we could eliminate the phrase in the first in the second paragraph under policy statements, with no additional fees charged by the Park Authority. We already create the exception there for rec pack and other things. We are looking at a 5-year window before we review this again. And I just raise that as a potential change. But again, I think my view is we don't want to charge additional fees on general fund basic services.
I'm sorry, Tim, could you say the change again? I found the paragraph. It just took a second.
Yes, it's the last part of that first sentence where it talks about the basic services are those intended to be supported by general fund tax dollars with no additional fees charged by the Park Authority. We may come to a point in the next 5 years where we do want to charge additional fees, or we don't want to. We may be forced to charge additional fees for general fund services. I think that's contrary to where we want to go with 1 Fairfax, but making that change would send a small signal upstairs about our continuing shortfall. To eliminate that phrase.
That language, Mr. Hackman. We were doing our best to try to make it a little bit softer by using the word intended there. Correct. As opposed to saying a flat out supported. But it sounds like there may be a little lack of clarity on that piece of it.
No, I thought the intended change was perfectly fine. I understand why you were doing that.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Yeah, just the one question. You added that same paragraph and incorporated in the Park Authority's general fund budget. Can we say that? Because aren't we now aren't we now instructing the Board of Supervisors what they need to do? And we can say, those monies go into the general fund budget, but ultimately, aren't they the ones that decide what's done with it? They could take it and go do something else with it. I'm not sure we can instruct the Board of Supervisors.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. What we were, again, saying there, that if we are charging fees for general fund programs, we wanted to make sure that that was offsetting our net tax support associated with that. But if that reads as an instruction, I think we can soften that a little bit as well, to make sure that it's clear that we're not telling them what to do, but that's what our assumption is, at least.
I mean, it just reads to, and revenue from these fees is posted directly to the county general fund and incorporated in the Park Authority's general fund budget. That seems to be an instruction to county staff that is outside our purview.
Why don't we try to figure out exactly what you just said, Mike, and put it in there and see what we come back with.
Mike, are you implying that we should suggest it or just like recommend it? What?
Well, I don't think our policies are places where we recommend or suggest to the board. So I think we do that far more directly. I think our policy just outlines how we operate. And I don't think that we can have a policy that directs the Board of Supervisors. And I don't know that it's the proper role of a policy to suggest that the ultimate governing body what to do. I think that would be, outside of the policy process. It struck me based on, I hadn't really thought about it until Tim said what he said about the intended support piece. And I started thinking about this paragraph, and it just struck me that we need to think about how we word that such that it's not so that we navigate those waters correctly and understand our role versus the Board of Supervisors role.
Basically, what you're saying that this addition should not be there to begin with.
Unless there's a different way to come up with wording of something, I think it reads to me as us directing what happens to money that goes into the county's general fund. And as we know, we go through the budget process and can make suggestions to the Board of Supervisors of how they should allocate that money. I just don't think it's appropriate for us to try and put it into a policy directing them how to do it. I just don't think it makes sense.
Yeah, this is Ron. I would say I agree with you unless within the county policies or authorizations, this language is there already, saying that's what they will do with the funds.
Well, in which case we should refer to that policy, which could change next year. I'm not saying it will, I'm just saying they have the right to change that policy, we don't.
Let's look into finding out whether or not it's in there and see if we can sort it out. My other fear with this is just to make sure that it doesn't read almost like the revenue fund, where if we don't make the amount in the general fund and then they give us back what we reap what we sowed, which was the whole point of the general fund for things like Rec Pack, whereas it goes on no matter if we win, lose, or draw. That might be problematic as well. So let's look into that. I think those are really good points.
Okay. This is Lynnwood. I've got a minor formatting thing on the second page where you've got the bullets for the policy. It says 305. Isn't that just supposed to be a continuation of 109, or am I missing something?
No, that's just a auto format piece by word, and all of those types of things we'll go back and tweak once we've got a final document, so that all that's cleaned up at the end.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
All right, next up is policy 110, and this is for public art, and Ricky Foley is going to speak to us about this one.
Thank you, Allison. Language was added to consider the Fairfax County Master Arts Plan. Additionally, we strengthened the language surrounding maintenance and insurance criteria. We wanted to make sure that the language was used to make sure that the public art reflects the surrounding community. We added references to the Fairfax County's One Fairfax policy and the Master Arts Plan.
Any questions? No, seeing and hearing none. Let's see everyone.
All right, and then this concludes the list of policies for tonight. And then for our next session of policy reviews we'll give you a break at the next meeting, and then we'll resume again in June, and we'll have the next 5, which will be the early 200s sets of policies to discuss then.
Well, great, thank you, Allison. And with that, this is Faisal Khan, and I hereby adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, sir. And I'll turn it over to Lynnwood for the Park Operations Committee.
This is Lynnwood Gorham. I'd like to call the Park Operations Committee to order, and in doing so, turn it right over to Dan Sutherland for presentation.
Thank you, Lynnwood. This is Dan Sutherland with Park Operations. Tonight, we're going to go over the park operations projects for the third quarter to see what sort of capital improvement projects we were able to complete this quarter. Next slide. So one of the improvements we made was to the Brookfield Park shelter. As you can see between the two pictures, we were able to improve the access up to the shelter for not only ADA, but in general. We were able to improve the condition of the surrounding area of the shelter by improving the retaining wall there, as well as some other improvements that went along with those. The total cost of the improvement was approximately $73,000 and was completed through a contractor. Next slide. Over here at Rose Lane Park, we completed some bridge improvements that addressed some major unsafe conditions. As you approach either side of the bridge, we went ahead and installed some concrete to better reinforce and stabilize the bridge. We also sat there and improved the access to it by restricting vehicular access to staff only, hopefully. This project was completed for a little over $11,000. Next slide. Here you see we, again, stabilized another bridge structure. As you can see in the top photograph, the stream had eroded to the point where the tie-ins and the support structure for the bridge itself were eroded by about 2 feet beyond the stabilization posts. So we went ahead and added some riprap and did some other stabilization of the stream banks to improve the stability of that bridge and hopefully make it last a lot longer before anything requires replacement or anything more extensive to it. The cost for that improvement was $8,000 and the work was done in-house by staff. Next slide. Here we did 4 backstop replacements across the county. 3 of the backstops were old style dome backstops that were replaced with our more modern straight up fencing. There was one at Franklin Farm, 2 backstops at Reston North, and a more traditional backstop, I believe it was a hooded backstop, was replaced at Beulah Park with straight up fencing, which is our current standard. As you can see with the pricing there for each of the backstops, it was approximately $14,000 or so for the dome backstop replacements and about $10,000 for the other backstop replacement. And all that work was done through contractor. Next slide. Very similar to a grant request you all approved for Greenbrier Park recently. We installed some fencing behind one of our synthetic fields. This happened to be at Franconia Park. As you can see, the fencing, it's black vinyl, so it does a pretty good job blending in with the surrounding area and doesn't stick out so bad, but it helps contain the balls from play, as well as protect the patrons on the outside of the field of play. We also did a similar adjustment with the fencing over at Loisdale Park. Some of the fencing there was not currently to the existing standards, and we brought it up to those same standards and added some other additional fencing as well. And with both those projects, they approximately cost about $24,000 and were done by contract. Next slide. And the last few improvements that we were able to complete were all restrooms. You will see here with Beulah and Lee District, and you will see another one for Wakefield on the next slide. But all the projects were done with a combination of staff and contractor, and were approximately $70,000 to $80,000 a piece. Next slide. And here, as you can see, here is Wakefield's improvements. And in all cases, they were great improvements from the old style of experience. When you went inside a restroom, you definitely knew you were in a park restroom or a municipal restroom, but they are in a lot better condition now that all the improvements have done. Any other questions at this time?
Hearing no questions and not having any other thing on the agenda for Park Operations Committee, I now adjourn the Park Operations Committee, and thank you very much, Dan.
You're welcome. Everybody have a
Thanks,
good night.
Dan, great job. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, we have a total of 3 minutes until we go into our P&D. So whatever you'd like to do with your 3 minutes, feel free to. With it being 6:30, the appointed hour, I'd like to turn it over to Chairman Ken Quincy.
Ken Quincy, and I will call the Planning and Development Committee to order. And I was sitting on the edge of my seat, Mike, and asked Samantha Hudson to introduce the first item.
Hi, good evening. I'm Samantha Sam Hudson, and I'm really happy to be here with you all this evening just to actually introduce this first item, which is the reallocation of funds and consultant scope of services for the Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Access Strategy, or PROSA. Stephanie Cornejo, who leads our long-range planning section, she'll present this item. Stephanie just joined the Park Authority this past winter, and she's part of our park planning branch, of course. She brings a wealth of knowledge and experience in park planning, having previously worked as a park planner for Miami-Dade County Parks. So we're very glad to have Stephanie on board. And with that, I will go ahead and just pass it over to Stephanie to take it away.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Cornejo. I'm the Long Range Planning Section Chief. I'm delighted to provide an update on the Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Access Strategy, also known as PROSA. We'll go over the main project objectives, deliverables, project schedule, and consultant support. The PAB previously received an update on PROSA on October 9, 2019. As we go to the next slide, we are spearheading PROSA because the Parks Recreation System Master Plan goals and the Park Authority's strategic plan objectives and policies. More specifically, the strategic plan outlines an action step to develop and implement an approach to county park planning and capital projects that considers resource protection, service level delivery, equity, recreation, and community needs. PROSA will also support FCPA's reaccreditation with the National Recreation and Park Association's Commission for Accreditation of Park and Recreation Agencies, also known as CAPRA, in 2023. As we go to the next slide, PROSA is a strategy to create an equitable park system where residents can access a quality park in 10 minutes from their home. The strategy will provide a path for improved park access and provide a balance of recreational experiences. To get there, we will identify gaps in the 10-minute walk access to parks. We'll take into account complete parks by determining the types of recreation categories or experiences, like active recreation, contemplative experiences, and social gatherings. And we'll define which facility types generally fall into those experiences. We'll also examine habitat connectivity, and then we'll take all that data and look at it through an equity lens. That is to say, factoring in socioeconomic and demographic data. Next slide. Equity is important to prioritize our needs, and it's crucial to distinguish equity and equality. Equality means each individual or group of people is given the same resources or opportunities. The top half of the image illustrates this concept. It shows that everyone received the same size bicycle to use, although, as you can see, not everyone can use it. Equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. Looking at the bottom half of the image, instead of giving everyone the same bicycle, everyone receives the exact bicycle needed to reach the outcome of being able to use it. Having the opportunity to fully participate and access parks aligns with Fairfax County's One Fairfax framework. For PROSA, we will focus on equity with the One Fairfax framework, the vulnerability index data, and includes socioeconomic characteristics and access to parks, trails, and park amenities. Next slide, please. Our end products will include a report and a GIS web-based platform. The report will include recommendations on our park level of service standards for urban and suburban areas. It'll also provide a gap analysis and prioritize area for park investments. The GIS web-based platform will be a tool to show park access and priority areas for those park investments. Next slide, please. Thank you. The project is anticipated to occur over 14 months with completion in spring or summer 2023. There are 6 primary project phases that generally includes data gathering, analysis, public engagement, report development, and report approval. As we refine the project schedule, we'll also identify dates to update the PAB on major milestones and next steps in the project. As we know, a lot of work has already been done since the PAB was last updated on PROSA, and we're building on all of that progress. To date, we've completed phase 1 of the project, which includes extensive background research, data gathering on best and emerging practices and equity frameworks, and also developing the park entrance GIS data, which is very critical for this project. We're moving into phase 2, and this is why we're presenting to you today. As we go to the next slide, you'll see that we would like to include consultant support. Consultant support is needed in order to complete the PROSA strategy during the project timeline and for PROSA to support FCPA's CAPRA reaccreditation in 2023. We solicited a proposal from Kinley Horn Design Workshop using the basic ordering agreement for civil engineering and related professional services contract. The scope of services for consultant support will include public engagement support, technical advisory support, and graphic support for the final report. The consultant team was selected based on their extensive experience working on world-class park systems, including the city of Boulder, Vancouver, and more recently in Loudoun County and San Diego. We're very excited about the opportunity to work with the consultant team, given their experience across North America, developing incredible park systems. In order for us to move forward, we ask for your approval this evening for the reallocation of funds and scope of services to provide consultant support for public engagement, technical advisory support, and development of the graphic report, including graphics, maps, and final document design. The consultant support is estimated to not exceed $125,000. The consultant scope of services includes cost estimate ranges and options to allow for flexibility as the project moves forward, and $25,000 is included in the reallocation of funds for future contingency. As noted on the slide, the consultant fees will be funded through the Park Bond Construction Fund, bond premium, and Mike Peter is here to answer any questions related to funding. As we turn to the next slide, we greatly appreciate your time and attention. Thank you for your consideration to this request. This is the first action item on your agenda for approval of the scope of services and reallocation. Your approval will allow us to proceed with PROSA strategy in the project timeline. Thank you again. I'll be happy to take any questions and feedback.
Any questions, comments?
Yeah, the only the comment I've had is in terms of public engagement. First of all, welcome back, Sam. This is her first public appearance in quite a while. It is so good to have you back at the helm.
Great to be back.
We certainly appreciate that, and we missed you when you were across the street. So we'll get that out of the way. But in terms of the public engagement process, you know, what's that kind of look like? How extensive is it? You know, what's the outreach in terms of not only live meetings, but, you know, interactions with the public to gain their support and their comments?
Thank you for the question. We're still currently we're developing the public engagement plan. It will include in-person and virtual opportunities to engage. I'll be happy to report back to the PAB once we get to a draft plan.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Bill.
No, I just said thank you.
Oh, will that also include written or electronic engagement? You said virtual, so those few people that may want to write something in.
We'll be drawing from our entire toolkit of different options to engage with folks.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, this is
Lynnwood?
Two more things.
going back, I don't know, 4 or 5 years when Sam was here before. She spent a lot of effort getting all of our different plans and procedures and stuff like that synchronized and made more distinct and frankly cleaning them up very, very well. Clearly, some of the content we've talked about in this meeting is not addressed in those documents, but I can certainly see where there's going to be some overlap into those documents. Are we doing anything special to make sure that those documents stay consistent with this document going forward, so we don't get back into that place where we used to be, where we had contradicting things in different guiding documents for us?
Sure, I will say that the first phase, and also since Stephanie has been on board, one of her bigger tasks has been to review our existing plans and see where there may be potential for overlap. And so that need for consistency and alignment is certainly top of mind as this project proceeds. And we may have another family of plans graphic, if any of you recall that graphic.
That's water. That is water torture.
Yeah. Thank you. That's the answer I wanted to hear.
Stephanie and Sam, I just wanted to ask, as part of the process, will you, or I'm assuming the research and the data analysis is looking at historical documentation as well. I personally, and hopefully as a group, we'd like to see those things that we have historically done that are lessons learned, so that we can, looking forward, not repeat some of the dead ends we might have gone down in the past. I'm believing every strategic plan builds on the past to plot the future. So I'd just like to know what lessons we learned from the things we've done in the past that we don't have to repeat.
Sure. I mean, I can share, at least from where I sit now as the branch manager, straddling between long range and development review. I think that there's quite an opportunity for us to actually look at how we're implementing our plans through development review quite a bit more. I'm sure as we proceed and get into the analysis, we will uncover more lessons learned that we'd be happy to share with you when we come back for updates moving forward.
Michael.
Ken? Yeah, I'm not sure this is directly on point, but again, Sam was involved in this process before, when I think both Lynnwood and I had this observation as well. And Bill, you'll recall that we actually had this conversation multiple times as a board, that one of the things with all these different plans is they all have they're not necessarily all in sync in terms of review times and when things are supposed to happen. You know, often we find ourselves doing, oh, we have this major strategic plan, but we're not going to do the resource plan until 2 years later or whatever. I would just reflag that as we go through, as we go through any of these kind of big strategic processes of plans, that we really at some point need to figure out the syncing of the plan review so it culminates in the final one, rather than kind of this more haphazard approach we sometimes find. So I just wanted to re-raise that.
Thanks, Mike. You know, that's a good point. I think that, you know, we've kind of got ourselves in a pretty good position, because CAPRA drives a lot of this now. CAPRA tells us when we have to have these things done in order for them to do their review, so that we know that every 5 years now, we're getting a comprehensive look across the board at everything and kind of what needs to be looked at, what needs to be thrown out in order to maintain the standards that we've set for ourselves. So thanks for bringing that up. But
yeah,
I think CAPRA's the corral on a lot of this.
I appreciate that, but I think also there are other political and funding realities. For example, maybe a 6-year bond cycle or whatever. I just think that we need to look at some of those other pieces so that we are as fully informed making certain decisions that are not necessarily CAPRA driven. So I think we got to be looking at all, because I just remember some plans hadn't been reviewed in 15 years and other plans are being reviewed every 10 and some years were 6. And I whatever the process is, I just want to re-wave that flag, especially because I think we're going to have to be as smart as possible going in, if we're looking at 6-year bond cycles. We need to be as smart as possible with our planning into those bond cycles.
Okay, any other comments, discussion? Is there a consensus to move this forward?
Yes.
Okay. I'll second what Bill said. Welcome back, Sam. And thank you both, Samantha and Stephanie, for the presentation. Okay, the next item, excuse me, Ken Quincy, again, I'm going to ask Paul Charay to introduce the second item. Paul?
Right, so I'm Paul Shirey. I manage the project management branch in the Planning and Development Division. And I'm going to tag team this presentation with Samantha Hudson again. So the quarterly status report for the first quarter 2022 is in your board package. So if you have questions on that, please let us know. And I'm going to walk you through the completion slides here. So we have a lot of projects in construction right now. There's over $30 million worth of construction projects. And just to show you a few that are coming down the home stretch here. So we have the Hidden Oaks Nature Center addition. The addition itself is finished, but we're still working on the renovations to the existing facility. And then out at Patriot Park North, the tournament baseball complex is about 50% complete. And what you're seeing there are the Little League fields that are under construction there. So next slide, please. Next slide. All right, so the first project up is Samantha's. Yep.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Paul. Sam Hudson. Most of our planning projects that I'm going to, I apologize, my dog. But most of our planning projects that I'm going to just update you all on today that we've completed have been completed actually over the past 6 to 8 months. So they will likely look quite familiar to you. The first project is our countywide pickleball study. You all endorsed this study in December of just this past year, 2021. The study provided recommendations for addressing pickleball needs countywide, of course, and we're proceeding with implementing some of these findings and recommendations already. You'll actually hear more about this with an update item that will be provided to you later in this committee on court improvements in Lynnwood. Next slide. And onto the Braddock District, next slide. So in the Braddock District, we recently completed the relocation of the Mary Reed Memorial, that's my dog again, I apologize, at Canterbury Woods Park. The former memorial site was subject to near constant flooding. We collaborated and worked very closely with Park Ops to complete this project. It was completed in roughly 4 weeks' time, and it was done in time to commemorate the anniversary of the tragic shooting at Virginia Tech. Next slide. Next slide. This is another planning project in the Drainsville district. We recently, just in January of 2022, completed the Clinny John Tree Park Master Plan revision. The revision added a development option for facility renovations, an art center or similar use, gardens, and a variety of other outdoor uses. Next slide.
All right, so this is one of our major projects out in the Riverbend Park. It's replacement of the maintenance shop out there. And so this was funded with 2012 bond funds. The total project cost came in at $1.3 million and was completed on schedule, and Heather Lynch was the project manager. It's a real nice facility. Next slide, please. Next one. All right, and out at Laurel Hill, the Central Green, we've just completed a completely new playground facility there. This was also park bond funds. So this consists of a tot lot playground and school age playgrounds. This project cost $250,000, and the project manager was Kelly Davis. Next slide, please. Next slide. All right, and out at the Oakmar Rec Center, we had failing HVAC equipment. So this was a replacement of rooftop units there. And it was a total project cost of $734,000. And Valerie Mason was our project manager here. Next slide, please. Next slide.
And in the Springfield district, we completed a revision to the Braddock Park master plan just last fall. The updated plan includes athletic field improvements and complementary features, including a concession stand and dining pavilion, as well as a loop trail, playground, and pickleball courts, among other features. This project was completed by Doug Tipsword, and the prior two projects were also completed by Doug and Adam Wynn. Next slide.
All right, and also out in Springfield is the Pohick Stream Valley. We've been completing various segments along in the Stream Valley there along the creek. And this segment goes from Burke Station Park up to Hillside Road. And the next segment will be hopefully starting this summer. So this was 2,200 feet of 8-foot wide concrete and asphalt trail down to the floodplain, and the total project cost came in a little over $1 million and was completed in February of this year. And Victoria Korbatova was the construction project manager on this. Next slide, please. All right, well, that concludes our presentation.
Thank you, Paul. Sam, is there any discussion now? Any questions that come up we can send to you, right, Paul?
Yeah, please.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Ken Quincy. I will now ask Adam Wynn to introduce the next item.
Good evening, all. This is Adam Wynn, Senior Landscape Architect and Project Manager in Planning Development. So Michael, Peter, and I will be presenting the staff recommended court improvements at Lynnwood Park for approval of a funding strategy. Next slide. So for a little bit of background, Lynnwood Park is one of the only parks in Greater McLean area that has 6 courts dedicated to only tennis. And we understand from past use permit records that these courts are occasionally used by USTA groups for tennis matches, and then a couple business users, as well as the McLean High School. So over the years, the court surfacing has deteriorated with large cracks, making the courts almost unplayable. So in reaction to the condition, reconstruction of these courts was planned for this fiscal year. Next slide, please. As you can see from these photos, the condition of the courts are in need of a full reconstruction of the paving. Thus, improving their condition would lead to increased usage of both tennis and pickleball, which is the overall goal. Next slide, please. The pickleball study identified a need for at least 2 dedicated groupings of pickleball courts in the county. And more specifically, the pickleball community in McLean expressed the need for dedicated courts. So staff reviewed pickleball possibilities at all the parks within Greater McLean area and determined that Lynnwood Park was the most feasible, as the park location met all of the considerations identified in the pickleball study. And the courts were also in need of the reconstruction for the purposes I showed earlier. A community meeting was held on December 1st to present options for incorporating pickleball courts as part of the overall court reconstruction. So these are the pickleball addition options that were presented to the community at the public meeting. The first option showed dual striping 3 tennis courts for pickleball. The second option showed replacing 1 tennis court with 4 dedicated pickleball courts. And then the final option showed replacing 2 tennis courts with 6 dedicated pickleball courts. The majority of the comments supported adding 6 or more pickleball courts. And then in addition to the public meeting, staff met with McLean High School tennis team coaches to understand their usage of these courts and determined that the reduction of 1 tennis court would still allow them to sufficiently schedule practice matches. Next slide, please. So after reviewing the public input and meetings with stakeholders, staff concluded that the following option provided the best layout to accommodate the need for both tennis and pickleball in the McLean area. The 4 dedicated pickleball courts are located at an appropriate distance from the surrounding residences to help mitigate any noise impacts. Additionally, the location of these courts are adjacent to a paved seating area, which is often requested from pickleball players, since the sport provides a social atmosphere with spectators and teams waiting between rotating matches. And then it should also be noted that as part of these improvements, the basketball courts would also be resurfaced. So the estimate for all of these improvements is at $650,000. Staff announced the recommended layout on the webpage through an information and also information releases, and emailed everybody else through an email campaign that attended previous meetings. Basically, all the feedback to date has been extremely positive, with many thanking FCPA for considering dedicated pickleball courts in McLean, just to offset the demand experienced at several of the shared use courts in this area. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to hand it over to Mike to talk about the funding strategy.
Great. Thank you very much, Adam. So we put together a funding strategy to bring before the board tonight after working with Supervisor Faust's office and with Mr. Hackman. We put this together because the Lynnwood courts were not originally in the schedule in terms of having them maintained this early. However, you saw the state that they're in, and we also saw the opportunity to be able to add the pickleball courts there. So as a result, we have allocated the following funding sources, as you can see on the screen. $300,000 from our park sinking fund, which we've been using for various court renovations. A proffer related to the towns at Carter Grove, which Mr. Hackman is prepared to sign now that we've gone through a public comment period. And then also allocating almost $260,000 from our 2020 bond project focused on Herndon Middle School fields. Now, this is not taking away from the Herndon Middle School field project, as we have additional proffer money that is specifically focused on recreation impact in Herndon, and in working with Supervisor Faust and with Mr. Hackman, we have identified funding to replace this from the bond item here. So what we're asking for tonight is endorsement ultimately of using those bond funds. Back to you, Adam.
Okay, so next steps and schedule. As touched on, public comments were received for the recommended layout, and additional commenting was solicited up until yesterday. The comments have been largely supportive. Construction is anticipated to begin shortly should the funding strategy be approved. And then the target for ribbon cutting would be late this summer. So with that, this concludes our slides and is open for any questions.
Okay, I'll ask for any discussion and comments and questions, and we'll start with you, Mr. Hackman.
It's a great project. Really excited that we can take another step in the implementation of the countywide pickleball study recommendations. Obviously the McLean pickleball users are thrilled, overwhelming comments in support of this. So yes, I think it's all positive from my standpoint. And thank you very much to Adam and Paul and other staff for their work on this.
Thank you,
Tim. This is way bigger than McLean. I mean, you're talking about, McLean users. This is being talked about all over the county, and in Washington, D.C. The pickleball community is all over this thing. So I just want to temper, local users. Local users are going to come from Springfield and Reston and from afar,
right?
Because of the overwhelming need for this. So I just want to alert you. This is hot off the presses, and they will be communicating this evening once this gets approved that pickleball is on at Lewinsville. And Adam, you can tell me, if I'm out of school here, but I'm actually leaving Friday morning to go down to Fort Lauderdale for the senior games, and there are 1,300 pickleball players that are a part of the senior games. And I've been cajoled into having dinner or a drink on Friday night with Helen White, where I can give her an update. So just wanted to let you know.
It is fantastic.
I'm sure she's watching now.
And have a wonderful trip, Bill.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments? Is there consensus to move this on?
Jim's got his hand up.
I'm sorry, Jim. You there?
Jim, you may be muted. We're not hearing anything.
You're muted, Jim.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
The question I have is with regard to the conversation with McLean High School. Could you elaborate some more on that, Adam? I know that high schools normally have, I guess, 6 singles matches and then 3 doubles. So what was the discussion with regard to McLean on that?
So I met with their high school tennis coaches, and McLean High School recently built 6 new tennis courts. And because of those new tennis courts, they schedule both girls tennis practice matches and then guys practice matches. And the way with their, in talking to them, I believe the girls tennis matches were, they were permitting the courts at Lynnwood, but they determined with the 5 courts plus the 6 courts with a little bit of rescheduling that would still be adequate.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, that said, thank you, Adam and Mike. If there are no other business to be conducted, I will hereby adjourn.
Ken, I'm sorry, this is Tim.
I'm sorry,
Did you, I think we got distracted from the call for consensus. So if you would please
I'm
ask
sorry.
for consensus on the question.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. I'll now ask the board if there, the committee, if there's consensus to move this item forward.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. That said, I will hereby adjourn the Planning and Development Committee meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Quincy. Dr. Carter, are you with us and where are you?
I'm in my car. Yes, I'm with you.
And who
I'll
are
be
you?
home.
Who are you again?
My name is Cynthia Jacobs Carter, and I am in Lee District.
Thank you.
Somewhere.
Somewhere in Lee District.
All right. Well, this is Bill Bowie, and I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Park Authority Board on May 11th, 2022. We always start out with our public comment period. I will check with Judy Peterson to see if there are any members of the public this evening that are signed up to speak.
Judy Peterson, PIO. No, there are no members of the public signed up to speak this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, with that, we will proceed on to the administrative items. Countywide administrative item number 1 is the resolution to honor Banjab Swajaron on his retirement.
So do you need a second?
Yeah.
Tim Hackman, I second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. That motion carries. So whereas Banjab Swajaron is retiring after 33 years of service to the residents of Fairfax County, having started his Park Authority career in 1989 as a laborer and retiring as the Park Operations Division Park and Mowing Manager. And whereas during his tenure, he was well known as a great asset to Area 3 maintenance, with a reputation as a hard worker and creative problem solver who was interested in not just caring for the parks under his watch, but also ensuring that his coworkers took care of the important details that made a difference to how parks and facilities looked and functioned. And whereas his primary claim to fame was his work on athletic courts where he ensured appropriate repairs were made, he experimented with different concepts and materials, and was so successful that other crews incorporated his ideas into their work as well. And whereas in addition to his work on courts, Banjab made sure all the trails, playgrounds, and picnic areas were safe and clean and ready for the public. And whereas as his retirement approached, he held workshops for his coworkers to impart his new approaches, processes, and materials, and created a how-to guide to ensure passage of this invaluable knowledge. And whereas Banjab was well-respected and liked by his peers, was an eager mentor, and often cooked up massive and delicious feasts for celebrations at Area 3 that endeared him to his colleagues who wish him well upon his well-earned retirement. And now, therefore, be it resolved by the Fairfax County Park Authority Board that it expresses appreciation and thanks to Banjab Swajaron for the dedicated and outstanding contributions to the Park Authority and the residents of Fairfax County, adopted by the Park Authority Board on May 11th, 2022. Congratulations. You gotta love his enthusiasm with putting on these how-to workshops, and I'm sure he's leaving an encyclopedia of material behind, but I hope he will definitely be accessible and not a stranger, because, you know, custom kind of scares you a little bit because he's the only guy that knows what's going on. So again, a big loss, but I hope he does really well in his retirement. Countywide admin item number 2 is the adoption of the minutes of the April 27th, 2022 Park Authority Board meeting.
This is Mike Thompson. I second the motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion carries. Action items. Countywide action item number 1 is the reallocation of funds and consultant scope of services for parks, recreation, open space, and access strategy.
This is Tim Hackman. I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion carries. In the Drainsville District, A2, the Lynnwood Tennis and Pickleball Courts funding strategy.
This is Tim Hackman. I so move.
Ken Quincy, I second the motion.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion carries. All right. Information item countywide number 1 was the running bamboo ordinance. We had a presentation on that. Any additional questions or discussions around that? All right. Chairman's matters, again, top of the list. Welcome back, Sam. It is so great to have you back. I'm sure the board is over the moon knowing that you're back in the place where we need you most. So definitely welcome back. We are in full bloom. Spring has sprung. So I've had the chance to go around and see a lot of different groups using our parks. We got to open the farmers markets and buy new things and see new vendors, which is really cool. Thanks to everybody that's making that happen. Thanks to all of our volunteers for those services. I want to give out a very special thanks to the Board of Supervisors and the staff for their consideration and ultimate approval of the 2023 budget, which will start on July 1st. Of course, we had a lot of engagement, both from a board, staff, and volunteer standpoint. And I think the voices were heard. And so to let you know that there are ongoing discussions still about capital programs and capital plans that may actually occur. I do have a meeting set up with Chairman McKay to go over some of those things in the second or third week in June. And I'll give you that feedback once I have that meeting with him. But tremendous job by everybody. Thank you for all that you do. And with that, I will turn it over to Jay.
Thank you, Chairman Bowie. I've learned my lesson. I will not be running the PowerPoint tonight, but before Allison pulls that up, I have a couple of things I just wanted to remark on. I wanted to put a finer point on the Canterbury Woods moving of the memorial. That was a phenomenal job by our staff. It's in Walkinshaw's district. I don't think that anybody thought that was going to get done prior to the anniversary, and park staff made it happen. I think everybody was was super thankful, and it looks great. So I just wanted to highlight that issue. We also had our public meeting for Mount Vernon Rec Center construction last week, and the closing it for 2 years. I think that people understood the reasons why, but they are not happy with the break in service. So it's about what we expected. But I also want to thank staff for, especially Judy, who's always phenomenal during these public meetings, for running that one, and Lynnwood for coming out there with us as well. Okay, so Allison, could you show the first one?
Community, we got a school, we've got a library, we've got a park in the back. It really is a complete situation, so I'm very excited to be here. I also want to thank all of the staff, not only from the Park Authority, but also from other agencies that are out here. Everybody was very excited for this event, and so I want to thank everybody who came out on a Saturday, and for all of you who came out on a Saturday to be with all of your community members. So thank you very much and have a really great day. Community, we got a school, we've got a library, we've got a park in the back. It really is a complete.
Thanks, don't show it twice. So that was a little video from Colmore Day. You can go to the next slide, Allison. It's a multicultural day in the Mason district, and this is just the way that the way it worked out a couple weeks ago. It's going to seem like this is all Mason district all the time, but that's just what has been happening for the last 2 weeks. So it's in its 17th year, celebrating the diversity and culture of the surrounding community. So hundreds of families came out, local businesses, Celebrate Fairfax, Park Foundation, and the Parks Department provided free food and drink, entertainment, live music, animals, face painting, and more. So Colmore Day is hosted by the Park Authority and Penny Gross's office, and it was a phenomenal time. Next slide. Same day, I attended the Annandale Greenway Earth Day celebration and cleanup. That's the Friends of Green Spring Gardens frog that I had to make sure that Chairman McKay took a picture next to, because who doesn't want to take a picture next to the frog? It was a phenomenal turnout. They read a proclamation for Earth Day and Arbor Day, and then proceeded with a stream cleanup. Next slide. Oh, Walkinshaw's in the back right. He makes a little bit of an appearance there too. Next slide. I also attended the rededication of the new marker for Francis Summer at Summer Cemetery. It is a small cemetery in, again, Mason District. Staff got together with the various chapters of the Daughters of the American Revolution to clean, fix, and rededicate the headstone for Francis Sumner, who was integral to the Revolutionary War. His taxes helped pay for the Revolutionary War. There were men in period garb showing the colors. We said the preamble, and it was a fun time. It was lovely weather, and so that's the Summer Cemetery rededication. Next slide. Okay, so we did our first Take Your Kid to Work Day a couple of weeks ago. It was a phenomenal success. We had about, I have it written down, we have about 60 kids and 40 volunteers who came with their parents to Take Your Kid to Work Day. Every division in the department was represented with children, and we had food, we had archaeology stations, nature stations, a barn tours. Our operations folks brought some of their equipment. We had a touch a truck. We had a natural resources tractor tour. The planners showed our kids how to plan parks. We had games. It was just a phenomenal day in general. And one of the first things that I asked when I started is, do we do Take Your Kid to Work Day? Because I really think that showing our children what it is that we do and how special it is so important. And so is recreating with each other as staff, with our families, I think is also very special. And I got to tell you, go to the next slide. Sorry. I tell you, we're really great at, what we do, but when we do it for our own kids, it is just phenomenal. So seeing us do what we do for the Park Authority family of children was just great. And I just wanted to say, unfortunately, to Chairman Bowie and Mike Thompson, and I think is that Tim or Ken Quincy. You guys have all been apparently replaced, and that might be the future generation of the Park Authority board right there. So
I'll just point out, I think that's Jay over on the side too. Just saying.
Over on the side. I've already. Trust me, I'm replaced every day that I'm at home. So he is fully replaced me. So it's my son and Sarah's daughters and Divya's daughter as well. So there. And that's it. I am home. I have my house has caught COVID. I have yet to catch COVID, so I'm still negative. We're just running through my family. So I say to everybody, stay safe out there in the streets that I haven't seen in a while. So that's my report.
Thank you. All right, Dr. Carter, let's start with you.
I don't have any comments. Thank you. I'm at home now. I can see
Okay,
that.
we
So
can
in
see
the
that.
district.
Exactly. Okay. Faisal?
I'll pass.
Mr. Kendall?
Just want to remind everyone that Green Spring Gardens is having its spring plant sale this Saturday. So if you want to buy some plants, you can do that. You can also go and find out how to keep the ones you already have alive. That's probably what I'll be doing on Saturday. Also, we're coming to the end of the nomination period for Ellie Doyle's. So I request everyone get out there and talk to your communities about getting people in. We want to have as good a battery of nominees as we had last year. So please make the effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Adu?
Thank you. I'll pass.
All right. Mike?
I'll pass tonight. Thank you.
All right. Kyle?
Nothing for me, thanks.
Tim?
I'll
Thank you,
pass
Mr.
as
Chairman.
well.
I'll
Thank
pass
you.
too.
All right. Jim?
I'll pass as well. Thank you.
Ken?
Well, I'm going to take this opportunity to give kudos to Julie Frederickson, John Berlin, and the rest of the Park Authority team for planning and conducting a very successful Healthy Strides 5K, 10K event at Burke Lake Park. And that took place on Saturday, April 30th. It was a sellout, by the way. And a good portion of the funds go to maintain trails and other needs at Burke Lake Park. So did a great job. And I should add that Mr. Kendall, his wife, and I honorably represented the Park Authority Board in the 5K event.
I will also represent that Ken left me in his dust.
Yeah, you gotta watch Ken. He's just a little competitive, if you will. Is there anything else, Ken?
That's all.
Okay, Cynthia, you were gonna raise your hand.
Yes. I'm not sure if this has already been mentioned, but thank you. Ron has definitely reminded us, and I just wanted to give you a date, if you don't have that already, about submissions for the Ellie Doyle event, so that these nominations are actually due on June 17th. So I would ask if you would also keep that date in mind so that we can get them in sooner rather than later. Thank you.
You're welcome. And don't forget about the volunteer appreciation hoedown that we're going to have at Frying Pan on Friday, May the 20th from 4 until 7. Please tell your volunteers, come on out. They need to RSVP. All of that information is on the website, or you can certainly get it from Judy if you need that. So with that, we will now go into closed session.
And you're not going to let me say anything?
Oh,
Bill?
I'm sorry, Lynnwood. Lynnwood, I'm sorry.
Is that like a hint that I've already talked enough?
No, it's not. No, my apologies.
I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank all of staff. As I remember, no less than 10 people came to the public meeting about the Mount Vernon Rec Center, and they did a wonderful job. And I think the meeting really couldn't have gone better. I can think of no way that staff or anyone could have made it better than it was. And it was overall, in my opinion, a good, informative meeting. Thank you again to everybody that participated.
Thank you. Thank you. And I missed you because your face disappeared on the big screen. So I'm trying to keep track. So I lost eye contact for a moment there. I'm sorry. All right. With that, we will go into closed session.
This is Mike Thompson. I move the Park Authority Board recess and convene in closed session for the discussion and consideration of matters enumerated in Virginia Code 2.2-3711 and listing the agenda for the meeting as follows. The discussion or consideration of the acquisition of publicly held real property for a public purpose, or of the disposition of publicly held real property where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3711A3. Consideration of the addition of property located in the Providence District to the work plan.
This is Tim Hackman. I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion carries. We are now going into closed session for approximately 15 minutes.
Chairman Bowie, we have a couple people that need to drop off the line.
And we need to stop recording too.
Yes. Mr. Tripp, would you drop off the line, please? And Gary Satora? Thank you.
This is Mike Thompson. I move the Park Authority Board return to open session.
Tim Hackman, I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion carries.
This is Mike Thompson. I move the Park Authority Board certified to the best of each member's knowledge. Only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements under Virginia Code 2.2-3711 and only public business matters as are identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting by the board.
Tim Hackman, I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion carries. In the Providence District, property in Providence District, add to the work plan.
Ken Quincy, I make a motion to add the property in Providence District to the work plan as discussed in closed session.
This is Tim Hackman, I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. That motion carries. Thank you very much, folks. Have a great, great evening, and we will look forward to hopefully seeing some, if not all of you, at the Hoedown on May 20th at Frying Pan. Take care. With that, we are adjourned.
Have a good
Do
evening.
well at the senior games.